April 1994. Mauro Prosperi was running through the Sahara Desert, competing in the toughest foot race on Earth when the sky turned brown. A sandstorm hit with no warning, winds so violent they stripped the desert of every track, every marker, every sign of human existence. Race officials ordered every runner to stop. Mauro kept running. He was wrong. When the storm cleared, the race was gone. Every footprint erased, just endless sand in every direction. He had 1 day of water, no food, no shelter. For 10 days he wandered the Sahara alone, drinking his own urine, eating raw bats, losing 15 kilograms until the desert broke him so completely he tried to end his own life, and even that the desert would not allow. This is a true story of survival. Mauro Prosperi was sitting at home in Italy when he first read about it. A magazine article, a few pages buried inside a sports publication. The article described a race called the Marathon des Sables, 250 kilometers across the Moroccan Sahara Desert, 6 consecutive days of running through sand dunes and heat that reached 45 degrees Celsius. Every competitor carrying everything they needed on their back through one of the most hostile environments on Earth. He read every word twice. He was Italian, a police officer, a man who had spent years in a profession that delivered adrenaline in controlled doses, enough to remind him he was alive, never quite enough to satisfy whatever it was inside him that kept asking for more. He had been running competitively for years, marathons, ultra distances, races that broke other athletes and left him wanting something harder. He had found it. Mauro spent months training specifically for the Sahara, running in the hottest part of the day, loading his pack heavier than required, studying survival techniques with the focused attention of a man who understood that the Sahara did not distinguish between the prepared and the unprepared. It simply waited. By April 1994, standing on the start line with the desert stretching ahead, Mauro felt something that years of racing had taught him to recognize. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. What happened 4 days later, he could not have prepared for.
Day 4. Mauro was in his rhythm, that disciplined, economical pace of an experienced ultra-runner who knows the race is won not by the fastest start, but by the most intelligent management of effort. His legs were holding, his mind was clear. Then the horizon moved. Not gradually, not with the slow build that weather usually offers as warning. The entire southern horizon turned brown and kept coming, a wall of sand and wind and fury. The Sahara had been building across 1,000 miles of open desert before arriving at exactly this moment. The radio crackled with race officials ordering every competitor to stop immediately and wait. In a simoom, a man who keeps moving loses his reference points one by one until he has none left and does not know it. Mauro looked at the storm. He made the calculation that feels logical from the inside and catastrophic from the outside, that forward was better than still, that he could push through the edge of it. He kept running. When the storm passed, every footprint was erased, every marker stripped away, the entire infrastructure of a supported race, checkpoints, flags, arrows pressed into sand, gone as if the race had never existed. Mauro stood in the ringing silence and turned slowly. Sand, dunes, sky, identical in every direction. He pulled out his compass, chose a direction, started walking. He was already lost. He just did not know it yet.
The Sahara is disorienting not because it is featureless, but because its features repeat. Dune after dune, each one shaped by the same wind into the same curves, offering the same view from its crest as the one before it. A man navigating by landmark here is navigating by a language where every word means the same thing. Mauro walked with the confidence of someone who believed his compass and experience were enough. He told himself the checkpoints would appear over the next ridge, that the race was just ahead, just over the next dune. He walked all day. Nothing appeared. When the sun dropped and the desert cooled with brutal efficiency, going from 45 degrees to cold in the space of an hour, he made camp alone in the sand. Morning clarified nothing. His water supply had 1 day left, calculated for a supported race with checkpoints at regular intervals, not for a man wandering alone in the Sahara. 1 day of water in a desert where the temperature reached 45 degrees before noon, where the body burned through fluid faster than most people understand is physiologically possible. He looked at the bottle, and he kept walking. 1 day of water. A trained athlete, a police officer, a man who had prepared for this race with everything he had. None of it changed what was in that bottle, or how much desert remained in every direction. The water ran out quietly. The bottle empty in his hands, the last swallow gone. The desert unchanged in every direction. Thirst in the Sahara does not feel like being thirsty. It feels like the world changing texture. The mouth goes dry in a way that is less like thirst and more like the absence of something that was always there. Saliva disappears. Swallowing becomes an action requiring deliberate thought. The tongue thickens against the teeth. The eyes ache in their sockets from the Saharan glare, a light so total and relentless it stops feeling like brightness and starts feeling like pressure. Then the heat works on the mind. Thoughts arrive out of order. Distances become unreliable. The confidence that carried him through the storm begins developing cracks as the brain fills gaps with things that are not there. Mauro drank his own urine, caught it in his bottle and forced it down, bypassing every instinct with the single overriding calculation that the fluid in his body was worth more inside him than wasted in the sand. He ate insects found beneath rocks, plants with minimal moisture. He moved before dawn and after the worst afternoon heat, sheltering during the hours when the ground itself radiated stored heat back upward. He kept moving, because stopping felt like a conversation with death he was not ready to have. On around the 5th day, though, the days had blurred into each other. Mauro came over a dune and stopped. In the depression below stood a marabout, an abandoned Muslim shrine, small, stone-built, walls intact. In a desert that had offered nothing for days, it was the most significant structure he had ever seen. He went inside. Bats, a colony clustered in the darkness above, hanging from the ceiling, shifting as light reached them. Small bodies, warm blood, moisture. He caught them, killed them, drank their blood, pressing them to his cracked lips, taking in something warm and immediate that his body had been consuming itself, trying to replace. He ate the raw flesh in small pieces, forcing it down without allowing himself to think in any terms beyond the one that mattered. This keeps me alive. He stayed in the shrine for days. And here, in the stillness, is where the desert found the part of him that physical suffering had not yet reached: his mind. The illuminations came quietly, not dramatic mirages, something more disturbing, voices just below recognition, figures at the entrance that disappeared when looked at directly. His isolation-starved mind generating presence from nothing because the alternative was a silence too vast to process. He talked to his wife, his children, his friends, full conversations he knew were not real, held anyway, because the sound of a voice, even his own, was the only thing making the shrine feel less like the last place he would ever be. Days passed. 15 kilograms gone, his eyes sunken, his lips cracked so deeply they reopened with every movement of his jaw. He had walked 300 kilometers in the wrong direction. He was in Algeria. He did not know this. What he knew, sitting alone with no water, no food, no indication anyone was looking, was something the mind arrives at, not suddenly, but gradually, the way light fades at the end of the day. He was going to die here. The desert had taken everything: his water, his food, his direction, his sense of time, and now it was taking the last thing: his will to continue.
He reached into his pack and removed a small blade. With the deliberate movements of a man at peace with a decision, not in crisis, not in panic, but in the terrible calm of someone who has accepted the answer, he cut his wrists. He sat back against the stone wall and waited. The blood did not come. It moved slowly, thickly, barely seeping from the cuts. 10 days of extreme dehydration had thickened his blood to a consistency that made what he was attempting nearly impossible. The desert had been trying to kill him for 10 days, and now in the moment he decided to stop fighting, it would not let him. He sat for a long time, looking at his hands, at the cuts that had not worked, at the desert through the entrance, unchanged, indifferent, patient. Something shifted. Not hope, that word is too warm for what arrived. Something harder and more fundamental, a stubbornness so deep it had survived everything the desert stripped away, waiting in a part of him despair could not reach. He said it out loud, to no one, to the stone walls. If I cannot die, I must survive. He stood up and walked back into the desert. There was no surge of strength, no clarity of purpose, only the mechanical continuation of movement, one foot in front of the other, each step requiring a conscious instruction from a mind barely functioning. He was still walking in the wrong direction. 300 kilometers off course, in Algeria. His skin burned beyond recovery, his eyes aching with every movement of the light, his muscles consuming themselves for calories his food could no longer provide. He walked anyway, because the alternative he had already tried, and it had not worked. Then, on around the 10th day, he came over a dune and saw something his damaged eyes took a long moment to confirm was real. Movement, tents, figures. A Tuareg family moving through the Algerian desert who looked up and saw a figure stumbling toward them and understood immediately, without needing explanation, what they were looking at. A man at the absolute edge of what the human body can survive. They brought him in.
The medical assessment was clinical and direct. Organ function approaching failure. Dehydration requiring carefully controlled rehydration. The body so depleted that introducing fluid too quickly would cause its own damage. Weight loss in numbers that reflected the physician's disbelief. The doctor said what needed to be said. One more day. He would not have survived one more day. 10 days, 300 kilometers in the wrong direction, urine drunk, bats eaten raw, 15 kilograms gone, a suicide attempt that failed because the desert had already taken so much there was not enough left to make it work. And he was alive. 2 years later, because he was exactly the kind of man this story has described from the beginning, he entered the Marathon des Sables again. He finished it. So here is the only question. When you have nothing left, what makes you stand up anyway?